Okay, welcome to our second installment of our Matthew study. To sum up what we went through in the genealogies, remember, it's not just boring names that make no difference. It is Matthew's showing us how Jesus is connected to the entire story of the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, all the way back through all the heroes to Abraham, even with women in there, right? Which is something really different for that day and age. So that's what we have so far. Now the second part, we go to Matthew, the second half of Matthew, and I'd like to read to you this one from Matthew 1:18 through 25. It's the birth of Jesus. Matthew 1:18 through 25, follow along in your book. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place. His mother Mary was engaged to Joseph, but before they came together, she turned out to be pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Joseph, her husband-to-be, was an upright man. He didn't want to make a public example of her, so he decided to set the marriage aside privately. But while he was considering this, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared to him in a dream. "Joseph, son of David," the angel said, "don't be afraid to get married to Mary. The child she is carrying is from the Holy Spirit. She is going to have a son. You must give him the name Jesus. He is the one who will save his people from their sins." All this happened so that what the Lord said through the prophet might be fulfilled. Isaiah. "Look, the virgin is pregnant and will have a son, and they shall give him the name Emmanuel," which means, in translation, God with us. When Joseph woke up from his sleep, he did what the Lord's angel had told him. He married his wife, but he didn't have sexual relations with her until after the birth of her son, and he gave him the name Jesus. Matthew 1:18 through 25. Now, boy, there's a ton of stuff in here, right? We often think, oh yeah, okay, well, that's nice to hear at Christmas time, and we sing carols about it. All right, here again, we don't think much, where's the dynamite in this? Well, there's plenty of dynamite, okay? First of all, textually, you'll notice that in Matthew, we get the perspective of Joseph, the husband-to-be, who is rather dubious and concerned that maybe his wife had been fooling around on him, right? Contrast that to the book of Luke, where Luke's perspective comes from the excited Mary, who knew full well that she was going to have the Messiah as a baby. Which brings me to that stupid, "Mary, did you know?" Yes, she knew. The angel told her. Shut up. Anyway, ranting aside. So, Matthew's book, we see from Joseph's perspective, and he's really dubious. Okay? Now, some other things in here are that one of the connections between these, Matthew and Luke say, is where an angel says to both parties, "Don't be afraid." Something that we all might really want to consider. Now, stepping beyond that difference between Matthew and Luke, we can come to that portion that says, well, this is just made up garbage. Virgin birth, yeah, we all know better. We're wise modern folk who know science. Those old timers back thousands of years ago were just morons who didn't know how babies were conceived, and so we'll just put up with their mythology. After all, there were lots of other religions where gods had sex with women and they conceived, and Hercules or Heracles, however you want to say that, lots of them. Achilles, lots of them. You see what I mean? There's all of those stories, and so we can, as moderns, often just shake our heads and say, oh, poor old timers, not very smart. By the way, we really shouldn't be that arrogant. For instance, do you know how to make concrete? Romans knew how to make concrete at the time of this writing. They were building tall buildings. The pyramids had been up for thousands of years by this time. Do you know how to build a pyramid? Make concrete? I don't. They were smarter than we think. Don't be arrogant, okay? Just word to the wise. Don't be an arrogant jerk. We're not as enlightened as we think we are. People is people. We know some science, yeah, but they weren't stupid. Now, we have Virgin Mary here. Now this can become problematic to people. We know miracles don't happen and this is just made up. Well, Matthew and Luke are telling us this, not to try to impress us. It's just this. All right, so some people even go on to say, and the Catholic Church is guilty of this, that Mary stayed perpetual virgin. Nowhere in the book does it say that. It even implies that Mary and Joseph had a normal married life. You know what that's like. Anyway, they had a normal married life after that. And Joseph had more children. Jesus had brothers and sisters, like James, who wrote the book of James and was a leader in the Jerusalem church after Jesus' death and resurrection. Now, some people can even come from that perpetual virgin thing that, it's better to be a virgin, unmarried person than it is to be married. And, that is unfortunate. Not true, right? Singleness, great. Married, great. It's all wonderful. So, oftentimes Christianity gets that bony finger pointed at it. Oh, they think sex is bad. Sex isn't bad. It's a gift from God. So we don't want to go that far from Mary here in this whole virgin thing. Now, we do know, again, like I said, Matthew and Luke were taking great risks here in saying that Jesus was conceived, Virgin Mary, Holy Spirit kind of thing, because, as I said, other religions had that very same idea. And we may assume that Matthew and Luke are helping in this whole virgin birth piece and the Holy Spirit being present to maybe allay fears that Mary had been messing around before she got married. Say, for instance, in John chapter 8:4, and I'll leave you to look that up, that Jesus was conceived because he was special through the Holy Spirit. Okay, not that Mary had been messing around. Anyway, another piece in here is that Joseph is spoken to in a dream by God. Now that's very interesting, right? Because here again, in our Western scientific bent, rationalistic society, we don't think God really speaks in dreams. But if you were to go, say, to Muslim majority countries today, there's super abundance of stories of how God, Jesus, however you want to run it out, comes speaking to Muslims in dreams, telling them things, speaking to them, and they have these conversion experiences because, well, to go boldly up to someone and hand them a tract of the 4 spiritual laws might end someone up in prison and potentially dead. God does speak through dreams. We just, unfortunately, don't like to believe that. And so I wonder if God respects that and doesn't come speaking to us. I mean, I've never had God speak through a dream. Maybe I should pray that way, right? Maybe we should try that out. But anyway, Joseph hears from a dream. God speaks through a dream, rather, to him that he should go ahead and marry this young girl. Mary probably, by the way, was 13 years old at this time. Joseph was probably a little older. That happens when the life expectancy is 25 to 30 years old. And that's why becoming a rabbi, a wise old rabbi, you could only become a rabbi when you were 30 years and older, because by that time you were an old person and wise at 30. Okay, so Mary was young. Joseph was probably young too. They were getting ready to start out here. Now, Matthew, continuing on in his Jewish style, his Jewishness is what I was going to say, in his style, tells who Jesus is through his names. And just to let you in, Jews believe very strongly, at least in this era, not knowing contemporary Jewish culture too much, I can say in this time that Jews believe very strongly in the importance of names. They wouldn't just call their child some random name. They would give the child a very specific name that meant a very specific thing. That's a very Jewish thing, and you can see that all the way through the Old Testament. The prophets naming their children. Anyway, I transgress. No, I don't transgress. I wander away. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So back to the names of Jesus. We hear Jesus called by Matthew Emmanuel and Jesus. Okay? Now Jesus in Hebrew is the same as Joshua, a very popular boy's name at the time, hearkening back to Joshua, who took the people into the promised land, setting them free from exile. Moses couldn't do it. It took Joshua to finally accomplish the good. Okay? So interestingly enough, and here this is very important in Matthew, Jesus being the emancipator, the one who sets free from exile, from slavery. Moses and Joshua set them free from slavery to Pharaoh. But Jesus, the second Joshua, if you will, sets us free from the exile of slavery to sin and death. The final emancipation, the final setting us free from slavery, from sin and death, which is accomplished on the cross and in the resurrection. More of that to come later. Joshua, Jesus, same thing. Yeshua, Yehoshua. Okay. The second name here, coming out of Isaiah 7, is Emmanuel, which means God with us. Here again, we have this the name means a lot. We have this promise that God is with us, and that comes in Jesus, the incarnate one, who pitches his tent among us, right? John chapter 1, who tabernacled among us, who dwells with us, not as God afar. Like that awful song from decades past, God is watching us from a distance. No, God is Emmanuel with us, the incarnate one, revealing himself through Jesus. God was always near to his people. God was always saving his people. Emmanuel, God is with us. Strangely enough, bookends here on the front and back of the book of Matthew. As Jesus gets ready to step back into heaven after his resurrection and staying with the boys and ladies there teaching them, he says, "And I'm with you even to the end of the age." At the front here, chapter 1, you shall call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Beautiful bookends, okay? Just want to throw that in there to you. So we have this idea that God is present. God is always present, working with his people. That's how we know God, through God's revelation of God's actions among us. We don't know God through philosophy, do we? And that's where we can get into danger with those whole omni words. Omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent, omni-who's it and omni-what's it. You build a God that way, you're going to be in trouble, because that God will always let you down. But the God of the Bible, who is an experiential God, who reveals himself to us in very concrete ways through our own experience, through dreams, and leading through pillars of smoke and cloud and pillars of fire, who speaks through prophets, who speaks through Jesus. That God doesn't let us down at all. That God is Emmanuel with us. So God's actions here in Jesus are aimed at saving us from this impossible place of being captive to sin and death. That's what Jesus came for, to free all creation from sin and death, to fix what had gone wrong in the Garden of Eden when sin came in. Okay, the promise that Jesus is fulfilling here, the promise to Abraham, is that I'm going to bless the whole world through you. I'm going to partner with Israel to fix what has gone wrong in the world. Jesus is the fulfillment of that, the God with us, the saving one. And it's much bigger than saving us from our guilty conscience. It's much bigger than that. Okay, but stick with us and we'll talk more about that. All right, so that is the second half of chapter 1 of Matthew, the lead up. We have a pensive, troubled Joseph who's spoken to by God saying, dude, it's all going to be all right. Don't fear. We have Jesus who is conceived through divine intervention. Okay, but Mary wasn't messing around. We have Emmanuel, God with us. We have Joshua, Jesus, who saves us from sin and death. That sets us up for the next pieces. Thanks. See you next time.